Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Latest in Travel, the guest-centric podcast. I have with me a special guest, Sarah Curra, who is a marketing and communications consultant with over 20 years of experience in this field. So Sarah, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And for anyone who might be watching this and might not be familiar with who you are and what you do you mind just giving us like a bit of an overview of your experience and background, and I guess specifically your connection to hospitality and travel industry?
Yes, of course. So back in 2002, I set up a PR agency. And our first client was in the travel industry, which gave us a gateway to working within travel. And we quickly became established as a travel expert and grew the business to having the most incredible selection of clients across the travel industry, from luxury to B2B, destination as well. And we also had international offices too. So during that time, I have really been exposed to lots of different product within the travel industry and really been able to grow my expertise across the industry.
Nice. And I guess before you got into this field of marketing, what was sort of, because it's always, I find it's quite interesting to sort of learn the background, like sort of before what you started off with initially, and what sort of brought you on the journey from way back when all the way up until today, and what do you think drove that?
Yes, gosh, the way I got into PR is almost embarrassing. I just left university. I was and had a massive argument with my father. He said, "All you're interested in is partying. You should go into PR." And then I'd just come back from traveling around the world, and I was temping at a big advertising and marketing agency, and got on really well with the person I was working for. And they said, "Listen, you're completely wasted doing this. We need to get you a proper role within the business." And we had lunch, and he talked through all the businesses they owned and said, "I think you'd be perfect for this business." And he put me into one of their fashion PR agencies. I hated fashion. Really hated fashion with a passion. It didn't get me excited at all. And so really the industry found me, because then I was in the office, and somebody I knew through somebody else walked in and said, "I know somebody who's setting up an agency. They want to promote a hotel." And that was the beginning. And so there was no planning. It was all just kind of wonderful coincidences and luck. Yeah.
I have to say, I can kind of relate to that as well. Getting into my field, it was also something not planned at all. But because I initially wanted to do journalism and copywriting in that sense, but from there sort of diversified into marketing within the company I was working for. So it's always interesting, I think, sometimes sort of learning the background of people and sort of the evolution professionally as well as like personally as well. It's cool.
Completely. And I think that it takes somebody to believe in you sometimes to know that you can do it. So I ended up working at this agency doing destination marketing, and they asked me to take over as MD, because there were 3 divisions and they wanted me to be MD of the destination marketing element. And I looked at the books and thought, well, if they think I can do it, I can do it. And so I decided to leave and do it. And then I set up my own agency. So, I probably would have done that unless somebody said to me, "We think you can do it."
Yeah. And sometimes it just takes that person or persons that believe in you and
yes.
give you that.
Yeah.
That's cool. You mentioned destinations, and I know you mentioned you've been doing quite a lot of traveling in the past like couple of months. Is it sort of business, pleasure? What sort of interesting, like, have you been to any interesting destinations? Has anything like stood out to you in terms of experiences or anything interesting to report?
Well, I've been taking advantage of this wonderful new world we're in flexible working, and I actually took August off for the first time ever, and it was an amazing experience, fantastic. And I was lucky enough to go to several places. One of them, which I felt slightly epitomized this term revenge spending, which is a term I hate, revenge travel, because it just sounds so negative. But it was a good mate's significant birthday, and he arranged for a bunch of us to go to an island in Greece and celebrate his 50th, which was amazing. And I'd never been on that sort of celebratory, lots and lots of different people staying in a big villa. I'd never been to Mykonos either. And I loved it, because it's not my first choice of a way to party, not to party, to holiday, because it's clubs and beach clubs and nightclubs and amazing restaurants. But the sense of theatre everywhere you go is fantastic, and it's full of kind of Instagrammable moments and just brilliant experiences that are laid on for people, so they remember you. So I thought they did that very well. Yeah.
And did you just go to Mykonos, or did you go to other islands as well? Or
We just went to Mykonos and a bunch of 50-year-olds and showed them how to do it. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
And so we spoke a little bit before this interview about sort of your passions and your interests from a professional perspective. And something that you are quite passionate about is the process of constant innovation. So kind of connecting that to hotels and I guess the wider hospitality and travel industry, what would you say, what would that look like to you in terms of process innovation, constant process innovation? What does that look like?
I think it's taking apart your product and really looking at every aspect of it, and seeing how you can do it better, how you can think differently. I mean, in very broad terms, I think one of the things that I've noticed that people talk about is, when are we going to go back to 2019? When are we going to go back to business travel going up? And leisure travel has already increased massively, and I think that there's a danger in that we think things will go back to the same. Nothing ever goes back to the same. It's changed forever. We have changed forever, the way we live, the way we work, the way we travel. And I think that as a result of that, you do need to keep assessing how you're doing, looking at your processes, looking at your the way you communicate, the way you engage, and really just keep checking, is there a better way of doing this? Am I really appealing to my customer? Am I thinking about my customer? How have they changed? Because trends, people talk about what are the trends in travel. Trends take a long time to filter through, but there are little changes that happen all the time.
It's interesting that you mentioned sort of this notion of when are we going to go back to pre-pandemic times, and that does seem to be sort of I guess among certain circles, that's the question. But something that's quite interesting, because I know we've also sort of briefly discussed this sort of notion of caring about the customer and showing the customers that you care as a business. And something that became quite a big trend during the pandemic was with all the cancellations and having to get refunds and so on. The guests and travelers were sort of at least like reaching out more to hotels directly to try and get that, transparency about what's going on with the destination, or what are kind of restrictions can we expect, what are the rules and this and that. And it kind of sort of diversified from being sort of the OTAs dominating this interaction with the guests, I guess, and more the guests going and talking to hotels directly. And this seems to be like a precedent that's been set, shall we say. And I guess, what are some of the ways, in your opinion, that you think hotels could sort of pivot towards this demand of people reaching out directly to them and sort of deliver a service that really shows the customer that they care and that the customer comes first?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just COVID that has made customers has increased the expectation of customers. I think it's the Internet of Things. I think it's, the way that Amazon will often send you recommendations of things they know you will love because of their algorithm, or whatever you want to call it, and Netflix. And I think we're so used to that now. We're so used to being understood and for our every need to have been preempted, that there is a pressure on hotels to do the same thing. And I think that the way you do that is through listening to your customers, through taking time to understand their motivations, through taking advantage of the data that we now have on our guests sensitively, because it is a balancing act, and making sure you're using that in the correct way to really tailor make the experience for them. And I suppose that experience is no longer just from the booking; it's from their very first interaction with you. It's pre-booking even, So when you say prior to booking, it's not just that. It's when they first come across you. How do you communicate that your values, the sense that you will go the extra mile for them? So it is about having a great website, great content, and really expressing and articulating your products through stories and experiences that make sense to that particular customer.
Cool. And you mentioned the sort of having the great website, specifically speaking, and I guess putting yourself in the position of the consumer. If you were to look at a hotel website, what would be like 1 to 3 things that would sort of drive your decision to book at that hotel? Just out of curiosity.
Everything's got to be just easy, a couple of clicks away. It's really annoying if you can't find a telephone number, or sometimes you do want to have a chat with them. So it's just everything you need there, and great visuals that tell a story but that don't hide anything. Once you're used to looking at visuals, you're thinking, oh, what's on the other side of that? So a certain sense of honesty, and about a product. That sounds crazy, but you do know what I mean. It's you need for them to tell you a story, but it's got to be true, and then not just saying we're in the center of the city, but why should I care that you're in the center of a city? Does that mean that I can go to the Bank of England Museum and get a behind the scenes tour with the curator? Well, if that's the case, then I'd love to stay with you. Do you know what I mean? So it's making sense of it for me.
Yeah. And I guess it's important to also know the customers or the market that you're catering to, because I feel like sometimes it's almost like businesses, not just hotels, but they try to be all things to everybody. And it's almost like, let's throw mud on the wall and hope it sticks. And then it ends up being a lot of noise, like on either a website or the social media or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It can feel scattergun. I mean, I just genuinely think that sometimes I think, people have become too introspective and just think about the brand. How do I get this person? How do I get that person? But it's, the brand is in the heart and soul of your customers, and who are your customers, and how do you turn them into customers for life?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very true. And it's something, I was even telling a friend the other day, like when you sometimes go to book an airline or even on an OTA or something like that, there's just so much noise that it just makes the process almost like a little bit confusing, stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess keeping it simple as well, knowing the audience and catering to them would probably be quite important.
Yeah.
Cool. And so now we're going to move in a little bit, I guess, to the trends, and something that is obviously quite a hot topic, and it was before, but I think, again, speaking specifically for the wider travel hospitality industry, is this notion of sustainability. And it was I think it was something that was talked about before, but it's sort of been heightened. And then when, travel came to a standstill as well, there was sort of this, okay, let's now start thinking more deeply about the implications of, our carbon footprint and so on. But then it's also an oxymoron, obviously, with the, you know, it impacts the travel. But then how, I don't know, in your opinion, what would be a way that not only the businesses, that being hotels, airlines, and so on, and the consumers, but how can all the parties, including policymakers as well, like work together to sort of drive this notion of sustainability, but then also more of like the conscious travel trend as well?
I mean, I think, you know, I think I completely agree with you. The word sustainability in travel always jars with me because I do think it is an oxymoron. And I think it is more suitable to talk about traveling consciously and traveling responsibly. You know, we've just come to the end of a summer where we've seen scorching temperatures and floods in parts of Europe and the US. You know, there's a real drain on water. It's a massive problem throughout Europe this summer as well. You know, so I think we do need to start looking at travel and how we can mitigate the impact of travel at the moment. It seems crazy to me that we all go on holiday for 6 weeks at the same time, practically the whole of the Western world. You know, can we be coordinating globally holiday patterns and somehow just putting some capacity guidelines in place for places like, I don't know, Venice has been talking about a daily tourist tax, hasn't it? But it hasn't introduced it. And whereas I reading about the other day, there's a village, Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland, where it only has 700 people living there, but 7,500 people visit there every day. And the residents are fed up, you know, and you're not surprised to hear that. And their problem is not necessarily the impact on the village, that on the countryside. It's the impact on their lives, because people are parking everywhere, they're littering, they're loitering and taking selfies. I think it's Portofino that's just introduced a rule as well, no loitering, because they're so fed up with people taking selfies all day. Anyway, so I just think we need to become more conscious about our behavior on holiday, and that is education. And I think that there is, and maybe this is already underway, but I don't know about it, there is an opportunity for the travel industry, government and policymakers to coordinate, to talk about, you know, data analysis, sharing data, sharing best practice globally. There's so much we could do in the short term before we start seeing the long-term benefits of traveling more responsibly, because that it does take time to re-educate people. So how do we handle where we are now, and before that, you know, before we feel the impact of those changes?
Yeah, it's interesting that
I don't know the question.
Yeah, no, it did. Thank you. But it's interesting, and I totally agree when you say that it's an oxymoron, because even I think it was Booking.com recently, they released a survey that it was something like almost 80% of consumers want to travel sustainably or consciously.
Willing to pay for it.
Sorry?
Yeah, but they're not necessarily willing to pay for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of this, you know, there's this disconnect of, you know, we want to do this, but then, you know, you talk the talk, but then are you are you walking it as well, you know? And I guess it's,
and you know, some people can afford it, and they will spend that extra, however much percentage it is, to travel responsibly. But are they actually behaving responsibly when they get to their destination? And I'm, you know, I think we all are slightly demob happy when we go on holiday, and we forget about the impact on just residents, other people who live there.
Yeah. And would you say, like, as a traveler, what would be some practical sort of things that as travelers we could do to be more sustainable, and sort of keep that in mind even when you're in the, shall we say, the holiday mode, and it's kind of easy to forget about it? But like, what would be I don't know, 1 to 2 like simple things that could just be from a consumer perspective, do you think?
I just think treat it as somewhere that you're invested in the long term rather than somewhere you're just visiting for the day. And I think that if you're doing that, then you're thinking differently. You're picking up your litter and you're just behaving as though you love the place and that you belong, rather than just visiting and taking a photo and then.
Yeah. I have a funny story about that, actually. Like, one of the cleanest places I've ever visited in the world would have to be Switzerland. And I think I was there, last time I was there was like for just a few days. It was like a mini break just to visit a friend and stuff. And we were walking along and I saw like one wrapper of like a candy or something like that on the floor, you know, and we were just like, oh, like this, you know, how, why would you throw something like that? It's like the postcard, you know, destination, you know, like,
Yeah.
but it was like the one piece of litter that I saw in like my whole visit there, like just thrown carelessly on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it stood out.
It matters.
Immaculate.
Yeah, it really matters, doesn't it? Mm.
Yeah, definitely. Something interesting as well, and actually this was a study done by Great Hotels of the World, and something that we noticed in terms of the group bookings and like corporate bookings for, I don't know if I have the most updated numbers on this, but it was like for the whole of the year 2022, there was actually corporate group inquiries that the ones like when they turned down the proposals, the top reason that was cited was sort of that the hotel itself wasn't meeting like a certain sustainability criteria. And this is sort of in line with this new legislation that's now in Europe of like businesses, large businesses of a certain size, not necessarily small businesses. They have to report on they have to have a sustainability plan, and then they have to report on their initiatives. And so these big corporate companies were like, well, we don't want to work with a hotel that doesn't fit our sustainability criteria that we then have to report as part of this legislation. And so because it's now becoming like a critical business factor in terms of driving the decision to book, certainly for corporate bookings and things like that, how would you say hotels specifically could better implement or, you know, sort of establish a sustainability plan, but then also communicate what they're doing better to these corporate businesses that would be inquiring and wanting to book with them?
I think that we all need to get better at handling and using data for these reports, and there is a best practice there that is, you know, really basic approach to understanding your impact on the environment and reporting on it effectively. And that seems like a massive topic. And I think what's helpful is if you're a business, you carve it up into 4 areas: customers, employees, the community, and the planet, and really understand what the impact of your operation is in those 4 areas, and have a plan on how to mitigate that impact. And just as importantly, there's the training of the team, bringing that awareness into the team and the understanding, so that you have a complete circle, and to make the whole campaign really, not campaign, strategy really cohesive. So it's a mixture of having the right checks and balances, but also creating the company culture of responsibility. And I think that's a really basic requirement now. We've all been given this scary deadline of 2030 when the world needs to change completely, and we need to be behaving differently from ever before. And I think there's a lot of bandwagoning. There's a lot of very expensive tools that you can buy, and you can get led down a rabbit hole, I think, by investing in this and investing in that. And there's just so much to choose from. There's so much information out there. And I think that what companies can do is really innovate around their own business, take a look at their business and the key challenges, and then innovate around them. So by that, I mean sort of integrating a sustainable approach into their product development. So I mentioned earlier, you divided up into 4 areas: communities, customers, employees, and planet. And I think if you take the local community as an example, I think that's a really interesting area where you can innovate and look at how you can behave more responsibly at a social level. Say, for example, by investing in the local community, providing a certain level of healthcare, for example, in an emerging economy, or upskilling the local workforce, creating a pool of local talent. And that's great for your brand. It's a great story, but it's also important for those all-important bookings to be able to say that. And, you know, so you are ticking that box from the community level, you're enhancing your brand reputation, but also you're going to be creating better business results. You're creating a local team who will ultimately be your local workforce potentially. And by that, you're also creating employment opportunities for them too.
Yeah, it's cool to see what some initiatives in this regard, even with like the operational side as well, in terms of, you know, giving guests the option to, you know, not have as much turn down service in exchange for, you know, I guess like a free drink at the bar or something like that, you know, and it kind of, I guess those are also some ways that it communicates to the consumer that you're on top of it. And I mean, it's a very small example, but you know,
it's a really interesting one though, because it is tempting to look at things that you shouldn't be doing rather than things you should be doing. And I think you should always put the onus on what should we be doing rather than let's not wash towels. I mean, that's a no-brainer, isn't it? Every day. But it's, you know, the biggest thing is food waste. How can we work more effectively with food? There's a fantastic Bristol chef, I can't remember his name, who uses every single bit of food that comes into his kitchen, whether it's to eat or recreating a dish with the leftovers or composting. And he's turned into a whole really brilliant sort of selling point, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, because it also, as you said, it creates that story, and it's something that you can communicate on all the channels really to get that message across.
Yeah, I mean, but the reporting is incredibly onerous, and for small businesses, reporting for these corporates it is a nightmare. So it's, yes, you know, you need to do the basics of it, but actually, I think what's going to really sell your operation is you can show you're behaving responsibly and proactively in your community.
Yeah. And I like what you said. Well, I agree with aligning that with the product development as well, because then it's kind of like two birds with one stone, especially for these hotels that maybe don't have, you know, there's so much to already focus on from the operational side, the online business side, all of this kind of stuff. And then sustainability in the mix is also one of those tricky things to navigate. So I totally agree that embedding it into the product development is, because it just kind of, everything then aligns and it's, I guess, more efficient and cohesive. Which is
exactly.
Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So moving along a bit in terms of some of the other trends, and we spoke briefly earlier in this conversation about flexible working and remote working. And since it's sort of now increasingly become the norm, certainly in the Western world and stuff since, you know, 2020, there's sort of like, what would you say would be some ways that hotels and other travel hospitality companies could sort of meet this increased demand for everything that comes along with the increased flexible / remote working trend, which would be, I guess, the communal workspaces, the need for like wellness, and the, you know, switching off. What would be some of your recommendations of what businesses could do to meet these demands?
I mean, do you think they're not meeting those demands? That hotels aren't meeting those demands? Because I think a lot of the hotels are doing a really good job at meeting those demands.
Oh yeah. So what would you say?
A few hotels who have developed, you know, much more co-working and communal spaces for relaxing as well, and you know, good internet is now given. I mean, I think there are a lot of hotels that do that really, really well. But I mean, that is, you know, it comes back to my point that I don't think that we should differentiate between leisure and business travel. because it's one and the same person, and there's no such, people talk about pleasure, and I think the latest one is listness. To me, everyone is always on, they're always on. They're always looking at their phone. They need great internet wherever they are and whatever they're doing. Even if it's just to do their shop for when they get home from their holidays. But and I think a lot of hotels are doing really well. But as to whether they're communicating it well is another subject. And it's working out how to communicate that and not alienate the other audience, because you're saying I'm great for people who are traveling on business because of this, and your leisure traveler is going to go, well, are you a business travel hotel alone, or am I going to have fun if I stay with you? So it's being able to carve up your product and sell it to the different audiences according to their motivations.
And I guess to kind of balance not only the work facilities, but also the leisure facilities as well, and kind of combining that together.
Yeah, and everybody, no matter what the reason that they're staying with you, they still want to have fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's always good to sort of mix it off, and even in the evenings or something like that, there'll always be that moment where you just want to kind of let your hair down and unwind a bit, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. And the final thing also, sort of going back to what we were saying about the destination, and it nowadays being more about not just visiting a destination on your bucket list, but more about the experiences of the destination. What would you say that travel companies and hotels could do to sort of pivot to this demand? Do you think that companies are pivoting to this demand, or is there anything that could be done better, in your opinion, from a marketing and communications perspective?
I think that people will travel much more in their lifetime now than ever before, and it will be a mix of sort of travel grazing with as we see now with flexible working, people doing many more mini breaks to make up for the monotony of working from home, and I combine that with much more longer term planned breaks that are based around, I want to abseil down the Eiffel Tower, not I want to go to Paris, but the idea of abseiling down the Eiffel Tower actually is not, that's horrific, but anyway, or I can't think of anything else right now, but and sort of having, so what I think is the end of the bucket list. I don't think the bucket list is the right way of looking at it anymore as the travel industry. I think that we need to look at the fact that the most important person in all our lives is me. And I want to invest in myself over the next 10 years. And these are the experiences I want to say I've done. And what's my personal investment plan, if you see what I mean? So it's not I want to go to these 5 countries before I die, but this is what I want to do. I want to walk across the Andes, go to the Atacama, all those kind of things. And so I just think that everyone is so focused on themselves. We know so much about ourselves now because all the various apps, how stressed we are, how fit we are, how unhealthy we are. And so it's all about what can the destination do for me? And I think as a travel industry, we need to think about that. What can we do for our clients in our destination that they will want to talk about and essentially show off about?
Yeah, and it makes a lot more sense as well. I think especially now with the economic situation and things like that, it's not necessarily that people are holding back on travel. I think actually, according to our studies and sort of the market data that we generate, there's definitely still that demand there, but I guess more of like what value can I get, not just simply going to something on a list and saying,
no, absolutely. And it's all connected. I just think everyone thinks it's their birthright now to travel. It's not a privilege, it's my right to travel. So we're going to see more travel but shorter trips. But I think the cost of travel, and that's not going to go away, the cost of flying suggests to me, from what I understand, is that we're going to have one trip every year, every couple of years that we plan long term, much more long term than ever before, alongside that travel snacking.
Yeah. Cool. And on this topic of like, I guess, experiences, and is there anything on your bucket list, shall we say, that would be something that you would really want to do? Like, what would be the one thing if you could do it right now in terms of like a travel destination or an experience? What would that be for you?
Oh my God, I've got so many. I would love to walk along the samurai. I think it's the samurai path in Japan, which sounds amazing. I'm really into my walking at the moment. I'd also love to walk along, do the Grande Randonnée #1 in Corsica, you know, which goes from either end. And also, I would love to go to Portugal, because I think that the hotel scene in Portugal at the moment, and I know that you were in Portugal, is so interesting. And there's so much going on. I think there's a lot to experience in Portugal at the moment, from the hotel perspective in any case.
Yeah, there's definitely a very strong spirit of hospitality. I think it's one of the things that whenever I think of Portugal, I just think of, you know, the hospitality and even, you know, there's been some times, you know, where I've gone to like an Airbnb or something in the middle of nowhere and, you know, and you're spoiled, you know, it's like, oh, let me like make you like home cooked, you know, baked goods, like by the bed, you know, like when you arrive and everything. And it's just these little thoughtful touches as well, but then also very interesting to learn like the cultural background as well, you know, and like and people are very friendly and warm, easy to talk to. So it's yeah, I recommend you should definitely visit Portugal.
I'm booking it, don't worry.
Nice. Cool. Well, I guess that sort of brings us to the end, unless I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add on this topic.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was really great to have you. Thanks very much for joining us. And thank you to everyone for watching. And we'll see you in the next one.